presentation. And I'll just give a brief introduction and then let Tom take over and share with us his work that he's done. So Tom originally hails from Massachusetts and came to the Western US in 2015 and worked in silviculture and fire on the Boise and Flathead National Forest for the US Forest Service right after the 2016 Pioneer Fire. So he'll be talking about that specifically today. He's now in a new position with the Forest Service as a fuels crew lead in the Teton Basin Ranger District in the Caribou-Targhee National Forest. He started his M&R in fall of 2021 in fire ecology and management, and now is clearly in his final semester. And this is the final project that he's been working on for, I think, not only this semester, but starting last semester as well. And he'll be sharing that with us today. We'll have about 20-minute presentation and then 5 to 10 minutes for discussion, and then we'll go from there. All right, thanks and welcome, Tom, and take it away.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kobziar, and thank you all for letting me present to you today. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm excited to talk about this project. It's been a really great experience for me, learning a lot through the process, and really happy with what I came up with also, and excited to talk about it. And as Leda mentioned, I'll be talking about the Pioneer Fire, which occurred in 2016 on the Boise National Forest. And this was one of the first large fires that I ever had personal exposure to. And my exposure to it was through silviculture, administering planting contracts. And it kind of showed me that there's some room for improvement in the way that we manage fire, that this really
I'm not sure what's happening.
Sorry, what was that?
Tom, just a second, if you wouldn't mind. I think you're on delay, Tom.
Oh no. I'm on.
Okay, you sound good now.
Okay.
You sound good now. You just went into like robot voice.
Oh man. Well, sorry, I'm on government internet here, so hopefully it holds out. No guarantees, but thanks for calling me on that.
Yeah, sometimes it helps if you turn off your video. So
okay. I will do that.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, sorry about that. I hope that gets better from here on out. But anyway, let me hop into it here. As I said, the Pioneer Fire took place on the Boise National Forest, 2016. And for anybody who's ever been on Boise, you kind of can probably picture what these forest types look like. It's this beautiful ponderosa pine, open stands with grass and sparse brush understory, which you can kind of see in this picture on the right here. There's quite a bit of mixed conifer, Doug fir, ponderosa pine, grand fir forest with a lot of Engelmann spruce in the draws. In those stands, we've got quite a bit more brush and timber litter understory. And then in the upper elevations, there's a fair bit of that persistent lodgepole pine forest type. We also have quite a bit of a mix of lodgepole pine, subalpine fir, and white bark pine. And then in the upper elevations on the ridge lines, typically we have more of a patchy, scabby subalpine fir and white bark pine forest type. The fire was discovered on July 18th and contained on September 15th. By August 9th, it had grown to 64,000 acres and finished at just over 188,000 acres. The suppression that occurred on this fire, some pretty aggressive actions were taken, but they were largely ineffective. The Clear Creek burnout is a great example of this. That first slide is from a planting project in Clear Creek, and that drainage burned as the result of a burnout that a hotshot crew conducted around some summer homes at the base of the drainage, and pretty much all of Clear Creek burned within the next day. There was some pretty active fire behavior driven by some high winds and good terrain alignment. Quite a bit of plume-dominated behavior also, and some areas where significant overstory mortality occurred without crown fire, even just from the hot gas killing that overstory. And then, of course, we had quite a bit of crown fire also. See on the right here, it's kind of burning in one of those patchy subalpine fir stands, but really significant overstory mortality in that, even the dry ponderosa pine forest types as well. And this is where I'm going to touch on my first SLO, which is learn and integrate, where as I said, I was on this fire as a silviculture tech, and it's really helped inform my perspective on fire management and kind of the costs and benefits of our actions and inactions as well. So for this project, I looked at fires that occurred in the area of Pioneer Fire in the period 2001 through 2015. There were 253 fires in the vicinity of the Pioneer Fire at this time. As you can see on this map on the right, 234 of these fires were contained at less than 5 acres. And this represents just a repeated exposure of firefighters to the objective hazards of firefighting and the rough terrain that these fires occurred in. And really a missed opportunity as well, which what I'm going to be talking about here is that each of these fires had the potential to produce some landscape treatment and to mitigate the effects of the large fire which was to come. And in addition to those indirect costs, the loss of fire, we also had major suppression impact cost to the landscape as well, putting in dozer line, retardant drops, lots of guys out camping and doing what they do, all those sorts of things. But as I said, the big one there was just the loss of fire in this landscape. And that's what I wanted to get at with this project, is to kind of model an alternative to this approach and sort of get at what would have happened if we had not taken such aggressive action on these hundreds of fires. So the questions that I was hoping to answer with this was, if we did choose to take a non-suppression approach to these fires, what would their growth potential have been? I mean, would they have gone big as well, just like the Pioneer Fire did? And ultimately, I was hoping to collect a series of perimeters and analyze those. But I wanted to see how a less aggressive suppression paradigm in this period would have affected fire behavior and growth, the Pioneer Fire. And then finally, could an effort like this, a long-term repetitive modeling effort, be used to inform these decisions in the future and be part of that cost-benefit analysis when we choose to suppress a fire or to not suppress it. And this is another SLO here, clarify purpose and perspective, where I want to have this work that I do be additive to the fire management community and to help us do the best job that we possibly can in fulfilling our mission and being good stewards of the land. So my goals here were to model all these ignitions that occurred in the area of the Pioneer Fire, as if they had been managed with a non-suppression approach. From those models, produce final fire perimeters that I would put into ArcPro to then edit fuel inputs within these perimeters to create a new landscape file, which I would use in Farsight to model the Pioneer Fire with edited inputs, but with the actual ignition point and with the weather and fuel moistures that were observed and that I adjusted to create my calibrated model, which I'll talk about in a second. And then finally, I wanted to determine the extent of change between the aggressive full suppression approach that was in general taken on all of these fires and compare that to an opportunistic approach, which is a term that I'm borrowing from Rigos et al., which basically just refers to when we have weather and resource availability, we're going to manage fire when we can. So the first thing I did here was I needed to calibrate my inputs in Farsight to create a model that would accurately represent what happened in reality. So I used 2014 land fire data and adjusted fuel models at the advice of local land managers on Boise. And I produced a model that came close to replicating the acreage and fire behavior of the actual Pioneer fire. From that, I used those standard adjustments to model the rest of the fires, the ignitions that occurred in that area. And I didn't model every ignition that occurred. I excluded fires that started in July and August, which was again at the advice of local fire managers there on the Boise. Just the reality of being able to take a non-suppression approach in July and August was not realistic, and that actually allowed me to cut the number of fires that I was modeling down to 79. And it was quite time consuming modeling these. So I actually, that was quite important just to cut that number down from, 253 down to 79. And those 79 fires occurred in May, June, and September. So after filtering these fires out, I used the standard adjustments that I had used to produce that calibrated model of the Pioneer fire. And I used land fire data sets adjusted in those ways from 2014, 2012, and 2001, based on which was the most recent data set available. The model runs were terminated when wetting rain occurred in at least 2 out of 3 consecutive days, which is a somewhat arbitrary way to cut these runs off. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. I think that's one of the major limitations of this project. But that allowed me to produce final perimeter polygons, which I could then put into ArcPro and use those polygons as the basis for editing my fuels inputs. And going back up real quick, that 2001 to 2015 period that I chose that because that 15-year window represents kind of a middle ground in what's generally accepted as the longevity of a forest treatment in mitigating subsequent fire behavior in that area. So these were the adjustments that I made to my land fire data, and I'll run through these real quickly. But for each polygon, I adjusted the fire behavior fuel models the same way. This again at the advice of local fire managers on Boise. TL3, 6, and 8, and TU5 got changed to TU1, GS2 to GS1, GR2 to GR1, and SH5 and 7 to SH2. For canopy cover, this I adjusted. I created 3 classes in terms of temporal proximity to the Pioneer fire. So for 2012 and 2015, those got reduced to 20 to 30% canopy cover where values were higher. For 2007 to 2011, those got reduced to 30 to 40%. And for 2001 through 2006, those were reduced to 40 to 50%. For canopy base height, 2012 to 2015 was increased to 5 meters. Where it was greater than 5 meters, I increased it by 20%. 2007 through 2011, I increased that to 4 meters and increased by 20% when it was greater. For 2001 through 2006, I increased that to 3 meters and then increased by 20% where it was greater than 3 meters. Canopy bulk density, 2012 through 2015, got reduced by 50%. 2007 through 2011 was reduced by 40%, and 2001 through 2006 reduced by 30%. And again, these were values that were suggested to me by local fire managers in the area who have experience modeling fire behavior and making these sorts of adjustments. So after making these adjustments, I was able to create a new landscape file, which I would use in Farsight to model the Pioneer Fire. I did this by using Mosaic in ArcGIS Pro to overlay the edited the polygons that had edited raster data within them, overlay those areas over the original rasters for each variable. So fire behavior fuel models, can be cover, etc. And that allowed me to create a new landscape file, which I ran with the original Pioneer Fire ignition point, with the weather that was observed on the fire, and then with fuel moisture inputs that I used in my calibrated model. Then I analyzed the difference in fire behavior and fire perimeters between the original full suppression approach, the large fire that resulted after that, and between my quote unquote opportunistic scenario, including all of the edited land fire data. And then I analyzed these different models in ArcPro, Google Earth, and Excel. And I think the most striking results are just the actual size of these perimeters. So on this map here, the original calibrated model of the Pioneer Fire, which is shown in the yellow polygon there, came out to 175,000 acres. A little bit less than the original, but that was the closest I could come in representing that fire. As you can see, it's a much more rounded shape than the original fire. That was one aspect of the fire that I was not able to capture in Farsight. And then the revised edited version of Pioneer Fire came out to just under 14,000 acres. So really a pretty huge reduction there. And this is going to cover my communicate SLO, where hopefully I will communicate these results in a sensible and meaningful way. So going into the individual outputs here, fire line intensity is the first one I'll talk about, and these are kind of organized in terms of the biggest change to the smallest change, where fire line intensity, we saw a pretty huge reduction. You can see the original intensity of 16,000 kilowatts per meter maximum was cut way down. Mean and median also cut down quite a bit as well. And on these Google Earth maps here, you can see there's these red pieces of the map represent higher fire line intensity on the left in my original model versus the revised edited version, where we never even had fire line intensity go above that 350 kilowatts per meter class. Heat per unit area, pretty similar story, major reduction in heat per unit area in the revised model versus the original. On the map here, you can see that teal color is actually twice the heat per unit area of the second class, that purple color. And in the map on the right, in the revised map, you can see there's quite a bit more of those lower intensity areas. And then in the numbers again, significant reductions, well more than halved. Flame length, really, as we get through here, these are going to get harder and harder to see on these Google Earth outputs. But the numbers capture these quite a bit better. Quite a big reduction in flame length as well. And same with rate of spread, major reduction. And in the revised model, we actually never even had a modeled rate of spread greater than 5 chains per hour, with the mean and median less than 1 chain per hour. So basically, when you combine this with the flame length average of 0.33 foot flame lengths, I mean, we're basically talking about creeping fire here, compared to a pretty active fire in the original model. The crown fire activity, I did not think that Farsight captured this particularly well. Farsight breaks it up into 3 classes. And even in the original model, we only had a maximum of that class 2, which, I don't know that this is actually particularly meaningful, this particular output here. But we do see that in the revised model, there's still a reduction there. So I think that my hope here is that this project is going to contribute to a relatively robust body of research that already exists that shows that when we treat a stand with fire, we're going to experience lower fire intensity in that stand in a subsequent fire. And in this project, I was not only able to show that within these stands we're showing reductions in fire behavior, in fire intensity, but also across a landscape when we have this cumulative effect of treating stands with fire, that these work in an additive sense, and they are effective in reducing the transmission of fire across a landscape. And we also know that restored fire regimes are more representative of the resilience that was observed prior to our aggressive suppression regime that we're in now. And I think that in the way that this project stands out potentially is that this is the first project that I'm aware of that has used actual ignitions that occurred over this period of 15 years that I chose to model what would be just an alternative to the aggressive suppression that we've been undertaking for pretty much the entirety of Bureau American Fire Management. So this is my SLO for Think and Create, where I think that I have produced something here that is a somewhat unique contribution to this field, and I hope that it's valuable in some way. I think that the strength here is that I have shown that the actual emissions that occurred are sufficient at achieving landscape scale treatment. The ignitions that I modeled actually burned over this area several times over. So at least in this area, existing lightning ignitions during periods of low fire danger, when resource availability is high, are actually sufficient in treating a landscape and achieving pretty significant differences between the actual Pioneer fire and what could have happened if we had taken a different approach in that period leading up to 2016. The limitations here, I think, are significant. Some of the fires that I modeled actually did kind of go a little bit big. There was a couple in June, especially, that ended up being, quite large, and not on the scale of the Pioneer fire, but they still would have entailed a pretty high monetary cost. Maybe not so much in suppression resources, because that was, the approach we were taking was to not suppress these fires, but certainly in terms of disruptions to daily life, people living in communities like Loman or Idaho City, and probably some loss of structures too. The other major limitation, which I touched on earlier, is I cut these fires off when we received wetting rain on 2 out of 3 days. And anybody who's been on fires knows that this is not that's not going to put a fire out. It might give you the opportunity to take more aggressive suppression action. But essentially, I had to choose a point to cut these fires off. They're really time consuming to model, and I needed to choose some way to cut these off, and then that's what I went with. And in general, that is kind of representative of this pretty coarse-grained approach that I took. I mean, these are some pretty major generalizations that are made here, and my hope was that by modeling a large number of fires and showing them in a cumulative sense, that that it would still be valuable despite the fact that this is a somewhat coarse-grained approach, as I said. And yeah, this is my my SLO for practice citizenship, where I hope to be an active contributor to the fire management community, and I hope that I can contribute something and continue to contribute a unique perspective, and try to bring a fresh look at things throughout my career. These are the data sources that I used. The Bearskin Raws was an amazing resource for me. That was the Raws site that I used for all of the weather and fuel moisture data that I used for this project. It seemed to be the most complete data set, and also in a good spot to represent the weather and fuel moisture that I was hoping to model. Landfire, of course, also an amazing resource, and this really wouldn't have been possible without that. Yeah, just a truly amazing resource. These are my references, and at this point, I'd like to open it up to any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Great, thank you, Tom. That was really nicely presented, and a tremendous amount of work that you did. I'm sure that there are some questions in the audience, and we can open it up for anybody who has questions for Tom.
I have some questions.
Yeah, hey Heather.
Nice job, Tom. That was really great. I feel like I should add this to REM 407 as an exercise. So as you had these conversations with the people in the Boise, what was their feedback from both being asked the questions about their field models and fire behavior? And then I'm guessing that you've showed them some of the results that you've got. What are the kind of conversations that you've had with people on the Boise about this work?
Well, I think it's kind of preaching to the choir a little bit. I think those folks really understood sort of we're talking about like areas that have historically really tight fire return intervals, and everybody is aware that we were creating like these major distortions in the landscape by suppressing all of these fires. And I don't think anybody is going to be surprised at the results that I've come up with here. I think there's pretty much a general agreement that we've kind of been taking the wrong path on this forest, and that things need to change. So yeah, I got nothing but support in pursuing this project, and yeah, like I said, I don't think anybody's going to be surprised that that repeatedly suppressing hundreds of fires is going to result in something like the Pioneer Fire happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. I've got others, but I'll save them.
Okay.
Hey Tom, really nice job. I kind of have a question in the same vein as Heather's question, but specifically about pods, because your work seems like it would be a really good argument for the Boise National Forest to plan for and implement pods, which for anybody unfamiliar, PODS stands for potential operational delineations, which is kind of where you model out, different resource risks and fire behavior across the landscape, and then you think about you know, where roads are, ridge lines, things that are natural holding features that you could potentially use, and you break your landscape out into essentially a bunch of polygons or management units, and based on the risk in those units and the weather forecast and et cetera, when an ignition happens, and these pods might be anywhere from like 50 acres to 500 acres, and when an ignition happens in one of those little pod units, you the management team, usually the fuels AFMO and the FMO and maybe the silviculturist and et cetera, get together and make a decision about whether or not they should use that ignition as like a wildfire use kind of thing, and maybe just let it burn out or burn off of those pod boundaries. And that would be like, because that kind of gets at like your point at the end where you said a lot of those fires you modeled did get really big, whereas if it were a pods situation, you could still use those fires, let them get bigger than 5 acres, but keep them maybe more contained or smaller, more accepting of risk, but still less risk than letting a fire just burn, right? And it seems so anyway, it seems like your work is a really good argument for the Boise National Forest to use pods. And I was wondering if anybody on the Boise National Forest had been talking about pods, or if they are already trying to plan and implement for those.
Yes, we are. I was involved with that a little bit last year. Obviously, I no longer work for the Boise, which is kind of sad actually for me. But yeah, we're working on them. At this point, I think there's quite a bit of distrust actually for the pods. I think there's this feeling that they're kind of like this academic exercise and less of a practical thing than they are, you know, just sort of an academic thing. But I think there's some people who are driving this, who are committed to it. Like I worked for Cascade WFM, and the SUPA back crew is very committed to this pod idea. And you know, he's a guy who's been heavily influenced by fires like the Pioneer Fire and by the Cascade Complex. And like it's like I was saying, there's definitely agreement that we need to take a different path, and we need to start making better decisions in our choices to suppress fires or to not suppress them. And the pods are certainly a great tool to make that happen. And I think that it's just people are a little bit resistant to things that are going to restrict their decision making, and that's kind of how it's viewed at this point, where it's like, well, what if I want to do something with this fire that is not suggested by you know, the criteria that we've decided upon for this particular pod. I think people are wary of that, but also yeah, like I think you're right. You know, a project like this is certainly like that the pod system would have addressed kind of the weaknesses here, and could have potentially given us a path forward to make decisions, you know, with more support from like that previous planning, having these kind of plans in line, so it's not like it all falls down on one FMO or one duty officer making the call on a fire. I think that's one of the great strengths there, is like take that pressure off of those individuals, and it becomes more of a collaborative effort, and it's less like personality driven as well. So yeah, I'm super hopeful that we can get the pods up and running. You know, it's actually, on a side note, where I work now, the Kirby-Targhee, we're actually quite a bit further along with that sort of thing. We don't call them pods here, but we have like this green, yellow, red system where if we have a fire in that green zone, we're pretty much never going to suppress it. And that's really cool, I think. And, you know, in yellow, it's a decision, it's, you know, individual case by case decision. In the red, it's, you know, that's the WUI basically, where we're going to suppress everything. But yeah, I think in a place like the Boise, which is just, you know, so desperate to have fire return to that landscape. Yeah, having a system like the pod set up would be hugely influential and something that I'm really hopeful for.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. And again, really good job.
Yeah, thanks, Kayla.
Great questions. Any other questions from the audience before we wrap up?
I got another one.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this modeling is a pain in the butt. And, like, I'm really quite shocked how much you did. Do you see a way to make this process more accessible to other people with improvements in technology through IFTDIS? Have you explored that much?
Yeah, I really need to explore it more. From my limited exposure, though, I absolutely think that this could be something that more people could get into. Because yeah, I mean, Farsight is kind of it's not great. Yeah, I mean, I sort of fell in love with it too because it, like, you know, made this project happen for me. But like, it was there's a big learning curve there, and I think yeah, for most people, like, most people are already don't have enough time to get the work done that they need to do. And yeah, I totally think that if we could, you know, advance the use of IFTDIS and maybe, I don't know, make it more of a standard thing that sort of everybody's just familiar with and knows how to use, like Behave. And maybe I'm speaking out of turn there. Maybe that's kind of more the case already. I'm still young in my career here, but yeah, like my, you know, I'm my AFMO, my fuels AFMO uses these things. You know, he uses IFTDIS, Behave, and stuff like that. But he's like I just, as an example, he's like kind of a he sort of views it as like a necessary evil of his job, rather than something that's like this great tool, this exciting thing that we can use to like promote the things we're trying to do, not just some box you need to check in order to get a burn plan approved.
I wonder if you were able to show this kind of concept to people that are FBANs and LTANs, and on days that they're just, you know, kind of modeled as much as they can model, and a fire's still on a fire. Like, I just think back on the situation shop on fires, and you know, like, after a while, like, if the fire's not moving anywhere, they're kind of just hanging out. I think that it'd be awesome to get them roped into doing some of this continued work on these fires and seeing.
Yeah, totally. And it's kind of like, you know, it's like when you're on a fire and you get like, you know, you finish putting in your swath, and then it's like, well, we got all this thinning that we could do. And it's like, well, we can go get like acres of thinning done without doing any NEPA. It's like, we're always looking for those opportunities as firefighters, but like, as I think, like, kind of what you're saying, you know, there's times when the people back at ICP are not doing much either. Maybe they could be doing some valuable work for the district as well. Or maybe not for the district, maybe for their home district, or who knows. But yeah, like, that's a, you know, a skilled workforce. And as you're saying, there's times when the urgency of getting that work done is not always there. And maybe there's opportunity for getting more creative.
I'll show this. Is this going to be recorded, Leda?
Yeah.
I'll show this to Kim Ernstrom. She'll be, I bet she'd be really interested in what you're doing. Do you know Kim Ernstrom?
No, I don't.
Okay, she's the head of IFTDIS, or she's the
Okay.
principal investigator of that right now for the RDNA.
Gotcha.
She'll geek out on this for sure.
Good, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I think a lot of I mean, in our M&R community, you know, there are a handful of FBANs too, so I think they would be really interested in seeing this as well.
Good. Yeah, I hope so. I hope it can be helpful.
All right. Well, thanks, Tom. I will follow up with you next week. I think this is definitely work that deserves to be put in some form of a publication format to make sure that it gets out to the broader community. These are really, I mean, it's an incredible amount of work that you did, and congratulations.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I'd love to get it out as much as possible. Thank you.
Okay. I'll follow up with you, and congratulations, and Let's give him a round of applause by Zoom. All right, and we'll be in touch soon. And
Okay, thanks.
the rest of the lab group can stay on.
All right. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Tom.